Hi everyone, my name's Tiiram Sunderland and I'm thrilled to be here today. My background is in climate policy with the Australian government, which, as Catherine Mack mentioned earlier, is one of those countries that's part of the Anglo-axis of climate ignorance. But to be fair, at the time I was working on climate policy with the government, we were heading in a more positive direction. But the more important thing about my background in the context for today is that until very recently, I was an MBA student at business school, just like all of you. And I still remember all the good times I had, particularly the sleeping in, the parties, and all those nightmares about my student debt. Today I work for Bain Co in London, and I work on sustainability and social impact, and those nightmares have subsided a little bit, although my sleep-ins have disappeared almost altogether. So, enjoy it while it lasts is one of my takeaway messages for all of you here today. But seriously, business school is an amazing opportunity. I mean, it's a real privilege I think all of you are well aware of, and I certainly had an amazing experience when I was at business school. I mean, met amazing people and learned a whole lot. But there is something that I want to raise. I have a bit of a bone to pick with business school that came away from when I was there. And that is my belief that unless sustainability gets embedded in the core of the business education curriculum, the business schools are at risk of failing everyone here, failing our generation and failing me. And so the reason I want to talk about this today is not because there's a strong moral imperative for climate change or not about pulling on your heartstrings. You all know about the climate risks and what we face. And so for the next 10 or so minutes, I want all of us to put aside any thoughts of polar bears or coral reefs, and let's talk about economics. It's not because I don't care about polar bears or you don't care about polar bears or the risks we face, which are very real. But for the argument I want to make about business education, we don't need any reference to morality. Because what I want to talk about today is why climate change and our action to address it really does represent one of the biggest transformations business and the economy have ever faced. And why I think that any business school that is not putting sustainability in the core of its curriculum is really risking failing to prepare its students for their careers ahead. So at the heart of the climate issue, and you've heard about this from Catherine and others, is an issue of financial accounting and budget management, something you should all be well prepared for from your classes. And in this case, it's our carbon budget. And we've heard about this, and there's lots of different ways to cut the numbers, but just to briefly remind you, if we want to meet our 2 °C warming goal by 2050, keeping warming under 2 degrees, the world essentially has cumulative, over time, 1,845 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent to release, which seems like quite a lot. I mean, a gigaton in itself sounds big. The problem is that in the 150 years from 1850 to the year 2000, we used up about 1,010 gigatons of this budget. And then in the 15 years, from 2000 to 2015, we went on a carbon-emitting bender and emitted another 500 gigatons. And what this means is that for the next 30-odd years before 2050, we're left with just 335 gigatons of CO2 equivalent left to emit. And given all of us, or most of us here, have been through the experience of GMAT, you don't need me to tell you that 30 times 36 does not equal 335. So we've got a bit of a problem here, and one option is to throw it all in and give up. But fortunately, all the governments of the world came together recently in Paris and agreed on the Paris Treaty and to work together to keep warming below 2 degrees or aim for below 1.5 degrees. That's all the governments of the world, except of course one, and I won't give any points for naming who that is. But this is important because what does this mean, this commitment? We can argue whether we're going to meet it or whether it's over-ambitious, but let's just assume for today that we're going to take our government's words as what they're saying. And what this means, depending on our goals around 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees, and depending on our appetite for risk, what do we want our chances to be? We want a 50-50 chance or a 2/3 chance of hitting this. This means reducing our emissions by as much as 95% by 2050 against 2010 levels. And I've got good news about this and I've got bad news. The good news is this is absolutely still possible. It's not too late, there's still a chance. The bad news is that there's no way we're going to do this unless we radically reimagine what it means for businesses and the economy to generate wealth. And so what this means is this goal, this pathway to a low-carbon future is going to affect a few businesses. Which businesses? Well, my rule of thumb is that your business is likely to be affected by this transformation if it uses either energy or transport. And so what we're seeing here is a dramatic transformation in the typical business, how it produces goods. And to give you one example, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, recently did some research that looked at what we need to do to meet our 2-degree goal by 2050. And they looked at the global industrial sector. So this is the entire global industrial sector and what they need to do by 2050. And they said that they need to reduce their emissions, or the intensity of their emissions rather, by 80%. And so this is, if we put this in the context of an individual business, think of an industrial company that runs factories and produces like heavy metal goods and real things, not necessarily that can be digitized easily. What the IEA is saying is that that company needs to produce in 2050 the same output that it produces today, but instead of having the 100 factories it might have today, it'll only have 20 factories. And this is quite a big transformation. I mean, there's a lot of technological process, and this is why there's a positive story around this. But this is a really big deal. And if you're a business person or a business manager facing this reality, there should be a 4-letter word running through your mind. Because the idea of a rapid and mandatory transition to a low-carbon future should be ringing risk alarm bells. And like any major business risk, companies will face shareholder pressure to prove that they have a strategy to respond. But now, this pathway to a low-carbon future isn't just about 4-letter words and great devastating challenges. It's also about opportunity, and you've heard a lot about this today, and you'll hear more about it this afternoon from companies and speakers about how savvy entrepreneurs and businesses who face this challenge will be the same companies that walk away with huge rewards and huge profits and revenues. And there's a lot of research about this, and we've heard a bit about it. But just to give you one example, there was some research done by Harvard and London Business School a little while ago that looked at the performance of different portfolios of companies. And this research said that if you invested $1 about 20 years ago in a portfolio of companies focused on profit, you'd likely have today around $14.46, which is a pretty awesome return, and I think most of us would be happy with that. Unless you knew that if you had instead invested that same $1 in a similar portfolio of companies that also focused on profit but took serious account to environmental, social and governance standards, that $1 would have instead increased to $28.36. Now, as Tansy said, this is a correlation and it's not causation, and we can't necessarily pull out the exact causes of what is driving this massive increase in shareholder price. But what we can say is, at a minimum, is that taking environmental concerns and sustainability seriously is not correlated with a lowering of financial performance. So what I'm saying here is, whether you treat this climate challenge and the path to a low-carbon future as a risk or an opportunity, the business case is clear. And it's a win-win scenario for all of us. If you manage the risks, you reap the rewards. And as a bonus, our children get a planet to live on. So let's go back to school. It's where we are, after all. And the reason this is important is because 42% of the top 100 Fortune companies have a CEO or a chief executive that has an MBA. So the people who lead these companies are you. They're the people who are coming from business schools. And so let's talk about you. Let's talk about who you are and meet one of you. So this is Mary. There may be another Mary in the audience, but this is maybe not you. So Mary is 28 years old, and she's studied hard and secured her place at a great university, a great business school like Fuqua and others. And assuming she passes her exams and graduates, she can look forward to a long career of working hard and not sleeping in and all those great things. But because of her age and what we're approaching, and because retirement age is likely to increase, if not beyond 65, maybe to 70, Her career is going to push out to the year 2060 or around then. But 2060, this is a date by which we've just discussed the world and the global economy must be well on its way to becoming decarbonised. So the question you should all be asking is Mary's business school preparing her for the challenges that she will face over the next 40 years of her career? Or put another way, is her business school teaching her about climate change, about sustainability, and about the impact of climate action and what that means for risks and opportunities for the businesses she'll go on to work for? Well, it's a bit of a yes-no story, of course, and there are amazing positive examples out there of business schools and teachers and student clubs that are doing incredible things to incorporate sustainability into the curriculum. In fact, we have some leaders in Sustainable Business Education here today, like Tansy Whelan from NYU Stern, or Jason Jay from MIT Sloan, or Dan Vermeer and Katie Cross from Fuqua. In fact, this conference itself is an exciting and amazing example of the change that's going on and how sustainability is slowly becoming a part of the core curriculum. But on the whole, and for the most part at business schools, sustainability is thought of a bit like this. Or where it is thought of, it's treated like an optional elective or a side dish. But what we've just discussed is that action on climate and the implications for business is not a side dish to business management in the 21st century. It will be at the core. So what do we do about it? We need to change the B-School conversation. And here I have a confession to make. Financial accounting is not my favourite thing. But when I was at business school, I recognised that it was important to my education and it needed to be a core class or a core aspect of my education if I wanted to succeed in my career. And so my message for you today is that sustainability should be too. It doesn't have to be in big green font or as standalone classes. In fact, it might be better if it's not. But what we need to see is sustainability being incorporated into the foundational learning in subjects like financial accounting or strategy and finance. So what do we do about it? Well, I believe we all have a role to play. The professors, the teachers, the school administrators, the businesses that will hire you and recruit you from business schools. But my personal view is that it's you, the students, that have the most power. And this is because, as you probably know, you are the customers of business schools. And last time I checked, you're paying an awful lot for it. So you need to think about what is going to help you in your career in the future. What's going to make you succeed? What are you learning today about what you need to understand for your career? Ask questions to your professors. Demand more. Get involved. Because I truly believe that if we work together, we can kick off a revolution in business education that will not only serve you and your career, but will also serve the planet upon which we all depend. Thank you.